Proverbs 18:17 says, "The one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him or cross-examines him." My wife, every day about 5 o'clock when we're off the road and we're home, she wants to watch Judge Judy while we're making dinner around 5 or 6 or whenever it comes on. I'm not a big fan, but it's easy to choose a side until you hear both sides of the case. And that's what that Proverbs is about. It's easy to make a decision. It's easy to see things from a narrow-minded perspective until you can get a wider perspective and see the big picture or see it from a different angle. So before we make big decisions in life, it's a good idea to get the best perspective that we can get. And I'm going to tell you about how this worked for me many, many years ago. And if you've listened to this, our audio version of Hope Signals, you've heard me tell some of these stories. But for those on YouTube, you've never heard them if you've only watched here. In 1991, my family and we bought a house. My wife and I bought a house an hour plus outside of where I worked. It was cheaper to live in the suburbs. I was a police officer. I was a detective working in forensics, processing crime scenes, working rotating shifts. When I say it's an hour out, that's if all the lights are green, and there was probably 30 lights at least between, and two bridges, actually three bridges and one tunnel. So normally it would be an hour and a half. I'm telling you that to say this was the most grueling 3 years of my young fatherhood life. All right. We had small children and I was having to do this commute. I was on the road sometimes easily 3 hours a day. And I've known other people. Some of you do that. My uncle worked in DC and dealt with the Beltway, like that kind of commute every single day. Man, I started to feel a call to ministry at the same time, because I was cleaning up the devil's handiwork in forensics. I wanted to do something preemptive and reach young people before they ended up in a body bag or, in prison. So I'd been volunteering with a local youth group and really feeling the call of God to go into full-time ministry. So you can imagine the pressure coming at me. Oh, this job is just getting in the way of what I really want to do. Well, I wisely, thank God for those that poured into me, and I made the decision. I read this book on faith. I'd built my faith up. I was about to step out and launch my own lawn care business. I'd done something similar to that in the past. I'm like, I'll make a way to provide for my family. I wrote my letter of resignation for the police department, but before I turned it in, I made an appointment with my pastor. And we weren't friends at the time. I was just this young guy, and he was like the high and mighty pastor guy who barely knew who I was. And I made an appointment to get counsel from him. And I told him what I was going to do, what my plan was. And he cried. He looked up at me, and he literally did. A tear came into his eye. And he said, "Mark, you're getting ahead of God. You're getting out of the nest too soon. The devil's going to eat you alive." I was so mad at him for not affirming my decision. He said, "You need to start using your," he asked me how long I'd been at my job. At that time, it'd been around 7 years. He said, "For 7 years, that job has used you. You need to start using that job." Well, that didn't do that made me think he didn't understand work ethic or something. Like, I just walked out of his office so angry. Well, by the time I did my hour plus commute to work, I knew I could either, take it or leave it, but he was my godly counsel and I knew what I was supposed to do. So I didn't turn in the resignation letter. I pressed pause. It was around that same time a man came to our church on a Sunday morning, and he got up and he said, "Hi, my name is Chip Gray. I am a disciple of Jesus Christ, cleverly disguised as a principal of Gloucester High School." He was the new principal in the area. That just stuck with the other things that the pastor told me. And when I began to go to work, seeing myself as a missionary to the streets of Norfolk that happened to be disguised as a police officer, I began to interact with people, pray with them in their yards, led a guy to the Lord in the morgue. I mean, I began to look forward to going to work. I couldn't believe it. My whole perspective changed. So here's my advice. You need to get better perspective. Number one, talk to your spouse if you're married and get their opinion for sure. They see blind spots you don't see. Number two, make an appointment with trusted leaders or send an email or make a phone call. Trusted leaders and mentors. Get their input. You don't have to take all of their advice, but definitely you want to get it and be able to use that as part of your decision-making process. And then thirdly, don't skip church. That's where your heart can be tender from worship and your ears are open and God can speak to you. Even if 90% of the service or 99% of the service wasn't relative, you didn't feel anything click, that 1% could be exactly what you need to see things from the angle you need to see them to make the best decision. God bless you. Have a great, great week.